Danger Dolan. From corporate marketing wars that fail to compromising on liquor ingredients and paying the price, we count 15 times companies have made awful decisions for greed, ignorance, or desperation. Number 15. It was 1977. Star Wars hadn't even been released when 20th Century Fox did the dumbest thing ever. They handed all merchandising rights to George Lucas. In return, all they got was a measly $20,000 at the time, but George became the head of a $3 billion plus company with reach all over the globe, its profits continuing to grow with each passing day. Fox had absolutely no idea what Star Wars would become, and for this blunder they missed out on claiming one of the most lucrative media franchise trademarks ever. Number 14. Before The Cosby Show passed into the hands of NBC, becoming a huge hit right from the first season, ABC passed on their chance to get a slice of the pie. Cosby made a pitch to ABC for the show, but they wouldn't offer him a commitment without a script or pilot ready, so instead he turned to NBC, where it catapulted from third in the Nielsen ratings to first for 5 more entire seasons. It went on to become the biggest hit of the 1980s and almost single-handedly revived the sitcom genre. Number 13. 1981, the blockbuster hit E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Steven Spielberg approached Mars, the confectionery company, to feature M&Ms as a small plot device in the film. The chief executives at Mars declined outright, and the producers behind E.T. were forced to go with their second choice, Hershey and their Reese's Pieces. When the film was released, Reese's Pieces were having dire sales, but then E.T. came along and sales of the candy triples, with reorders coming in at as many as 10 times a day for over 2 weeks. Mars, pissed at the missed opportunity, heavily implied they'd never even received an offer. Number 12. Kodak. We're in the age of rapidly advancing technology, with the first digital cameras only appearing in the early 90s. But 15 years earlier, in 1975, Kodak made the world's first ever digital camera with a patent ready for mass production. But they did nothing, and so let their competitors invent it first. The reason? Kodak didn't want to destroy the film industry and subsequently damage their own company. But had they produced this revolution for mass market, you might have ended up with a Kodak brand smartphone. Instead, they went bankrupt in 2012 and fell into obscurity. Number 11. Schlitz Beer. Back in the 70s, Schlitz was one of the biggest beer manufacturing companies in all of America, only behind Budweiser. Then they made a fatal decision to cheapen the ingredients in order to produce beer faster, which for a while worked quite well. But then people began to notice that the beer would form floaties in the bottom, which congealed into thick mucus, and Schlitz didn't recall them even after they realized. Eventually they had to cave in, but not after 10 million cans had been shipped, crippling their finances and ending their juggernaut company not even 10 years later. Number 10. It was in the 90s that search engines on the internet were few and far between. You had Yahoo, Excite, and Lycos. Myself, I used Webcrawler before it got bombarded with ads and paid links when InfoSpace took over. The original owners of Webcrawler, called Excite, were actually offered all of Google for only $1 million, but Excite declined. To pour further salt into the wound, Google lowered their offer to $750,000, but they still weren't interested. Not even 10 years later, Google went public, and today they're earning $60 billion annually. Excite ended up getting merged with Ask.com in 2004. Number 9. 1859, back when shovels and picks were the tool of choice to dig up oil. Then along came Edwin Drake and his uncle, who invented the first ever oil drilling apparatus. When Drake approached some salt well diggers with his machine, they laughed and called him crazy. Very soon after, diggers realized how much of a gold mine it was. They rushed in and became overnight millionaires. And poor Drake forgot to patent the machine, but luckily the state of Pennsylvania and oil barons paid him to express their gratitude. Number 8. Western Union, a big name in the communications industry during the late 1800s, with the president infamously scoffing at the idea of a telephone. For $100,000 he could have bought a patent that changed the world, but instead he wrote a letter calling the phone invention an electrical toy with no commercial possibilities. 2 years later, the president of Western Union realized his gigantic mistake, so spiteful that he employed Thomas Edison to outdo it, which never really happened. Number 7. Microsoft Bob. Back before Windows 95, we had Windows 3.1 and this infamous piece of software known as Microsoft Bob. It was like Clippy from Microsoft Office, but 10 times more insulting. It displayed software icons as objects inside a house and was the software responsible for the text font Comic Sans. It might have been decent if it had not come out the same year as Windows 95, which incorporated an easy-to-use interface without the silly, dumbed-down experience. Number 6. There was a time when the corporate giant known as Apple worked in a garage, but when they went to Atari to sell their revolutionary personal computers, Atari said no. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the founders of Apple, even said, hey, it's built from your parts and you can have the computer, just let us work for you. But still the answer was no. Apple now has a market value in the hundreds of billions of dollars, whereas Atari pretty much faded into obscurity. Number 5. 1962, a time before the Beatles were celebrities. They auditioned at Decca Records in London, and the executive of talent rejected their performance. He said to his manager, "Groups are out, and 4-piece groups with guitars are definitely finished." Unfortunately for him, over 2 billion Beatles albums sold all over the world during Beatlemania. Number 4. It's hard to imagine that Coke has been around for over 100 years, but it was hard to foresee that when the producers of Coca-Cola introduced a new formula under the brand of New Coke, the backlash would be intense. But that's exactly what happened. Despite New Coke tasting fine, the emotional attachment built up over 100 years from a consistent brand was too deep, and customers exploded with fury. Within 3 months, New Coke was gone, and Coke Classic returned to enormously high sales thanks to the controversy. Some believe it to have been all planned, but it was probably just a happy coincidence. Number 3. A more recent one, the year 2000, when video rental stores were booming, Netflix offered itself to help Blockbuster sell their brand online. Blockbuster did not accept their offer and instead had a terrible 10 years while internet movies and TV shows became a thing. Eventually they had to file for bankruptcy in 2010. They could have bought Netflix for $50 million, and instead, their stubbornness made them crumble into nothing. Number 2. 1972, MASH became a surprise hit for 20th Century Fox, but then a couple of big stars dropped out after a few seasons and Fox panicked. Foreseeing the show would not have long to live, they decided to sell rights for old seasons to various local TV stations, earning themselves $25 million. But then 4 years later, a thing Fox thought extremely unlikely happened. The show was still massively popular. Each TV station grossed over $1 million per aired episode out of 168 of them, and Fox got nothing out of that. Number 1. A story about one of the few times when marketing fails and customer support wins. A war between Kmart and Walmart in the 1980s. When both companies decided to duke it out, Kmart launched an all-out publicity campaign to raise public awareness of their store, and Walmart, without the funds to beat them, decided to focus on improving stocked shelf efficiency and immediate checkouts. Walmart obliterated Kmart's sales in the US simply from good customer service, and Kmart have been struggling to keep up ever since. That's it for this countdown, and have a good one!